Hello guys, good evening and welcome to today's class, which will be a continuation of our last class, right? Last class uh, you were introduced to the Django REST Framework, right? And of course, you were introduced to REST API, what REST APIs are, and what they are used
Hello guys,
for,
and
right?
welcome to
And also,
this class.
tonight we are going to be discussing about how to create endpoints, with Django REST Framework, and we'll discuss about HTTP methods. We'll talk about uh, requests. We'll talk about endpoints. What are endpoints? What are HTTP methods? We'll talk about headers. We'll talk about data and a whole lot of basic things you should know and understand before you can start creating endpoints or before you can start, making requests to these endpoints. All right, so I'm just going to go over some basic things you're expected to understand before you start creating endpoints, right? So the first thing is you have to understand what REST API is. Now, REST itself is an acronym, and REST means representational state transfer. So representational state transfer, that is like the way you present, or the set of rules you have to follow as a developer when creating your API. There is another common method to create API, which is known as GraphQL. I hope I pronounced that correctly, right? GraphQL, but we are going to be dealing with basically REST API. So we're building REST API, hence Django REST API, right? I think there is also Django GraphQL. Yeah, anyways, you can check that out. So so REST API, as I said earlier, is representational data transfer. An API, what an API is: application programming interface, is a set of rules that allows programs to talk to each other. So so in a REST API, there are like some basic terminologies you have to, familiarize yourself with, just to know what they do, right? So when you make, for example, when you make a request to an API endpoint, which is the URL. So a URL is when I make mention of endpoints, I'm referring to like a URL, so a specific thing. So when you make a request to a URL, you're expected to get back a response. So basically, those are like two things. You make a request, you get back a response. Make request and get back a response. Those are the two things. Even if you are, so those are like the basic two things. And when you get back your response, you are expecting some kind of data, or you are posting some kind of data, or you want to get back some kind of data or updates some kind of data. So mostly everything you'll be dealing about is data, right? Post data, get back data, update, delete some data. So when you're making a request, there are like four things you have to, be mindful of. There are four things that the anatomy of request. So let me just use that word. So the request is made up of four things. One, the endpoint, right? So made up of four things. The request is made up of four things. One, which is the endpoint, which I said earlier. The endpoint is the URL you are making your request to, and two are the methods. Now, These methods are in 5 paths, right? So we have the post method, we have the get method, right? We have the put or patch. Let me just add these two together. So yeah, very similar. And also we have the delete. So this is really like, you know, is headers, right? The headers. The headers are like uh is headers are like information that you pass along when you're making your requests. So this information uh, allows you to maybe have access to some kind of endpoint, probably the endpoint that is you need to be authenticated to, or access. So these headers can contain token, or they can contain the context type, or so we are going to see more of that. I think I'm doing a lot of talking now. So let's just go into coding, right? Right. So okay, so I showed you the documentation, the DRF documentation in the last class, right? And we were able to install the the framework, right? We were able to install the REST framework package, and we were able to set it up. So today, according to the topic, right, we are going to create some endpoints. Basically, we are creating 4 endpoints here. So an endpoint to post request, an endpoint to get request, an endpoint to update, and an endpoint to delete. Right. So yeah, let's dive into coding. Great. So basically, how did we get here? We started our Django app. We created a new app, registered it here, an app called API. We downloaded our REST framework package, registered it in our REST framework package, right? So before you can view data, right? Before you can show data in REST API, there are some like, okay, so I've mentioned some of the basic things already you have to be mindful of. So there's something we call serializers in uh in REST framework. So this means converting. What serializer does is they allow complex data such as Django query set, that is your model query set or model instances, to be readable in JSON format or whatever format, but mostly we'll be working with JSON formats, right? So what we're going to do in this tutorial is we are creating like some data, we store them, then we get them back, we update, and we delete some of them, right? So before we can do that, before we can store data, definitely we have to create like model. So we are going to create a model for that, right? So we create our model class. Let's name that. Okay, so let's say, okay, so you're a student in the school. Let's say students, student models dot model. So we create our fields. Of course, student have a name, which will be models dot char field, right? The char field takes in max length. You can make this anything, right? So you have to right? So it takes in the name and also student hours or probably registration number. Okay, let's pass in email models dot email field, or that can be unique. Yeah, so no students will have to email, right? And what else? Registration number can be models dot um, chat field also. Probably it will be auto generated. So max length of 55. What else? Okay, so I just add created ads models dot date time field. So now make this true under updated models this time field was also now add. Okay, so basically we've created a model, right? And we have to make migration. When we make a new model like this, we have to make migration and migrate in our database. So I'm going to start up my server. This is my terminal. So I'm going to run Python manager.py make migrations. So it says I have an error in URL line 5. Yeah, okay, so let's just comment this out. I'll and make our migrations and run migrate. Yeah, so by default, right, Django is connected to the DB SQLite, like SQLite database. So we're just going to be working with that. So we've created our models. Now, I mentioned something earlier about serializers. So uh, we before we can access like our data in our models, the query set or model instances, yeah, they have to go through serializers. They have to go through serializers. So what we'll do is we create a new file here called serializers.py. Now this takes in from REST framework, we have to import serializers, right? So you can definitely check out the documentation again. As I said earlier, I'm not cramming anything, right? So I make reference to this documentation almost all the time, right? So from REST framework is what we did here. And also we have to import our model. From models, import students, right? So we create a serializer class, students, serializer. So we pass in this and say, so we could just do our class mirror model, which we are serializing students, and fields is all, right? So we are serializing all the fields. Yeah, and okay, so I'll get to the parts of Postman soon. So we are serializing all the fields. Now we will need to create our views. So this is where logic happens, right? So in our view, we have to also to import some other things. I commented this out. So from REST framework, you import generics, status, response, and yeah. So we have I think 3 types of views in REST in DRF. Okay, so let's just check that out. Views, right? So we have class-based views. We have class-based views here. We have function-based views, and we have view sets, right? Those are like 3 ways you can display your data. You can process your data in GRF. So for this tutorial, we are going to be working with class-based views. So to use class-based views, and specifically generic, yes, generic views, right? Generic views are also class-based views. So our generic views are like, you won't have to, write the way, you won't have to start writing the way you want your data to be displayed. So generic views like already handles all that. Just almost the same thing with your Django views, which you learned in the crude tutorial. Right. Okay, so let's move on. So we create our views. We already import. So it says length views generics dot create API view. Now this endpoint is for the posts, making a post request, right? So making a post request, and for that we need to I will take in the query set, which is like the model, taking the query set, and also the serializer class which we created earlier. So we have to import model here from .models import students. So that would be query set equals students dot objects all, and then the serializer class. So serializer class would be equals to, so we have to import that to, that would be from dot serializer import student serializer, right? And the serializer class will be students serializers, right? Okay, so that's basically all what we need to have in our view. Then so now we need to map it with the URLs in here. So so I commented this out the other time. Let's just say path now is so we are create student. Let's just call that create student, and then say views dot student view dot as view, right? So what that does is store, as you can see, it stores the class-based view. So it will recognize it like as a normal view, so it could process it and then can name this students, right? So it stores the original class in the view function. So so then we need to map these in here. I think I already did that. So now we can test the endpoint. We can test the endpoint. So to test an endpoint, you have to you can decide to check from your browser, or better still download Postman. What Postman is used for is, I think, let me just open that up. Postman is for testing endpoints, right? So you can easily download the Postman from here. Yeah, so there are versions for each operating system, right? You can download Postman for Windows, Mac OS, and of course Linux. I think I'm not sure about Linux, but it should be. All right, so we're going to test these endpoints in Postman, right? So I have my Postman open up, and then I just come in here. I type in my endpoint. Okay, so first of all, you will notice there are some options here. We have to get post, put, patch, delete, copy, add, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. So we're making a post endpoint, sure, right? So type in the endpoints, which is my base URL, of course, is 127.8,000/API/create students. Boom. Right, and this has to, taking data JSON format, right? Okay, so if we try to send this, we should get like an error. Okay, I think yeah, so we have to start the server and you explore run server, right? So server is running back to Postman. So if we send this, we should get uh, an error. So we have to pass in. So we have to like pass in all the data requested because we are making a post request. So we have to pass in name, email, restriction, created as. Okay, so all these are auto generated, but name, email, and the registration number, we have to pass that into our request. So let's see. So in your say name, say name, or okay, my name is Olafemi Linger, and then what else? Registration number. Okay, email. Email is free at email.com, and then what else? Registration number. Registration number is 001, right? So if we make this request, all right, so we have an internal service error. Let's see, says dot create must be implemented. Okay. Okay, so in our serializer, we have to add a method dot create. So what it does is it creates like all these data, to post it into the. So when we pass in our data, right, when we post this data, what this dot create does is it serializes data so that it can be readable in models format, which in turns now stores it in the database, right? So that is what that does. And if we try to make the request again, hello. Okay, so I believe I'm still. All right, so as I was saying, we need to Yeah, so we created that in the, so we have another error here which says this guy. All right, so I already did in the, let's see. So let's just rerun this. Okay, let's check our serializer. Okay, view this cost of this. I don't think we need this. Right. All right, so someone is asking in their YouTube session what we are trying to achieve, right? So I said from the beginning, probably you came in late. What we are trying to do is to create endpoints to post, update, delete, and get data in form of JSON, like in via REST API. So that is currently what we're trying to do. And yeah, sure, we are going through that right now. So we have a server running and serialize the class. Okay, so let's check it from our browser. Why slash. Okay, right. So it says guest method not allowed, and we have to pass in raw data. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so it seems we have a bug we have to fix. So we are getting this error. Um, okay, so it says we have to call dot create function, and what we should have done is just say student dot or student dot object dot So let's check this again. It says cannot be posted in serializers. Yeah, so okay, so our Postman, let's try the endpoint again. And yeah, voila, we have a post request created, but then yeah, so the right, so it has been created. Now we have created that the students, right? But because we didn't specify any return message or whatever, so that is why we have empty here. When we do the get request, right, we would see. So let's add another student view Gates, because of course I was in class with Bill Gates then. So yeah, Bill Gates was I think so. What again? Okay, so this is getting interesting, right? Okay, so why? Because I specified the email, which is unique. So I don't know why it's saying why is returning this. The email is unique, but nevertheless, let's change this. Right. So I specified the email has to be unique, which it is. Probably I need to make some changes to my models and I'll fix that later. Right. Um, okay. So let's try this again. Hmm. Okay. Python manage UI because I made changes to my models. I have to make migrations and then migrate. Great. So and then we start our server and let's try this again. Yeah, sure. Okay. So right. So we have two students created now. Yeah. So we have uh post endpoints right there. Okay, so we have our post endpoint. So to create a get endpoint, so generics API view as or so we have create API creates API view, that's the post, provide a post handler. So the list API view now provides a get handler, which is what we'll be using next, right? So class you can say get student views which pass in generics dot list API view, and they will pass in the query set. So passing the query set, which would be, of course, this. So let's just copy paste this, and yeah, right there. And also we have to map it with our URL and say path get students forward slash views dot get student view dot as view and name get students. So we need to access this endpoint now in our Postman as a get endpoint. So we create a new, then HTTP page URL 8000/API/get student. So if you see these endpoints, it should return. We have our server running. Okay, so we have, so it should return these two. Okay, so obviously what we posted then only posted like two, it created two of those, but they were empty strings, right? Okay, so I get why these were returning an empty string earlier. So let's fix that. Let's fix that very quickly. So in our serializers, right, let's pass in fields. Let's just do this. Let's pass in fields. We want to serialize name is equals to serializers dot char field, right? Max length of 55. And we also have our email, which is serializer dot email field. And also, what else? Registration number, which is serializer dot char field. Great. And then we do where is it? So so I just say so the fields now say we are serializing ID, name, email, page number, right? Great. So in our views now views, all we do is in here we create a method def perform create. So oh, I don't think we need this anyways. Let's try it first, right? So you would notice like I'm doing a lot of back and forth, right? So it's one of those things, right? You might say maybe probably I wasn't prepared for this class, which I was, but these are these are stuff you face as developers, and you have to find a way. Before you go to people, you have Google to help you out. So we just have to find a way around these and see how we can make it to work. Sure. So Okay, so probably we can go another route, right? Um, let's see. Mm, Okay, so we can go another route with um, function-based serializers, right? Let's try that out and see if that solves our problem. I don't know, it's kind of weird, but let's go these routes, right? So we create function-based views instead. And to do that, we need to import from REST framework. We import so we need to import API views, right? So just copy paste that. Blah. So let's comment this out and do def. So we need to call the decorator API view, right? And do def create student person request under. Okay, so what we would do is our models, which is equal to students equals to students dot objects that's all issues on request set and serializer equals serializer b student serializer. You should take in our students, maybe sets many equals true, right? So we return a response of serializer.data. Great. So we check if serializer dot is valid, that is if r if the serialization of those fields were successful, we do serializer dot save on that model, and then we return serializer data. So let's try this. Yep, so views dot create students. So that has been lots of. Okay, so it says most made not allowed. Okay, so we have to specify in here. So we are making a post method, right? So you have to pass that in there in codes. Great. Right, so we are back to this is getting I must be missing something. Am I missing something? Right. So this was our issue all along. We should have passed in serializers dot model serializer here, right? I guess those are just one of it, just this line as yep. So yep, and we have been able to create a post request finally just because of our omission I did here, model.serializer. So now let's move on to create a get request. So I think I should try this other method and see if this should work, right? It should definitely work. Um, okay, so we need to make changes to the URL since we are no longer us. So let's try this again. Yep, and it works. Oh my god, it's so exhausting. So yeah, I think this is interesting, right? We have been on this for about 30 minutes or so now, just because we didn't put this here. And wow, okay, so yeah, so let's move on now. We create a get request, which I already did, and when we call this, we should get back those two we created, right? So wow, that was exhausting, right? And frustrating. Yep. So we got back this uh details stored. So that is a get request, and probably want to update one of these details. Maybe I want to update this with ID 3. Then I create an endpoint to then I create an endpoint to update, right? Because that is like the next thing to do. So I create an endpoint to update. And how do I do that? I just come over to my class in here, class update students views and generics dot update view, right? So, and with that, we'll be able to update our view. So we just need to pass in virtually the same thing in here. But because we are updating one of the views, right? So in our URLs, we have to specify update students, right? Update students and views dot update student dot as view. So in here, because we're updating one student, we have to specify the integer with this int pk. What it does is it takes in it takes in the integer of the students who want to takes in the ID of the students who want to update. So once we do name equals update students, right? And then yep, so we have that there, and we have an error here, right? So yeah, so let's create an endpoint to update. So that would be a put request. That would be a put request. And we'll access endpoints HTTP 7.0.0.1 8000 /API/update student. So we need to pass in the ID. Peradventure wants to update students with ID 3. So pass in this ID. And then we're also passing the body, right, of what we want to update. Probably wants to change the name to Bill Clinton. So, okay, so we're required to update the email bill@com and the registration number. Let's leave that at 003. Under send. So it updates the details. If we run this get endpoint again, and on our so you see user with ID 3 is no longer Bill Clinton, but it's no longer Bill Gates, but it's now Bill Clinton. And lastly, what we want to do now is the delete, which is somehow similar to the updates. So we just say delete student views generics dot destroy API views. Right, so what we need to do there is also we have to specify in our URLs their ID. So say delete under delete student views, delete, right? And when we visit these endpoints, HTTP /API/delete students. Now I have to pass in the ID. So we are deleting students with ID 1. We'll pass that in and make these requests. Says invalidating where. So let's restart these. Yeah, so it's deleted. So when we try to send the get request, we see we do not have a user with the ID of 1. If we want to delete user with ID of 4, which in here is Bill Gates, so we send that in here we send that request, and we will send the get request. We no longer have user with ID of 4. So basically that's how to create, post, get, read, put, update, and delete with Django REST Framework. Whoa, that was exhausting, frustrating, and a very silly mistake I made there. So yeah, so it's just one of those things, right? As a developer, you just see you don't have a comma somewhere you're supposed to have it, and then takes you a lot of hours to debug, right? So it's one of those things. So thank you guys for sticking with me throughout this course, right? So hopefully you have learned one or two things, and then also in a subsequent video we'll be going into authenticating endpoints. That is, if as a user, before you can view an endpoint as this, right? Before you can view this get endpoint, you have to be authenticated. Probably you have to have some kind of token. Anyways, we'll learn about that in our next class. So thank you guys, and see you in the next one. Have a good night.